right, so during this time, Howard, we've been watching The Last Dance, all 10 parts, just concluded the other night for people who may not have seen it. What did you think of this in a whole? We were pretty excited for it, enjoyed the whole process of watching it through. What did you think of it as a whole?
I enjoyed it a lot. And, look, there are any number of critiques that I think were, generally fair. They were fair lines of critique if you're going to critique. I did not watch this so much as an NBA reporter or as a journalist who's covered the league for 23 years as I did as simply a fan of basketball and of those Bulls teams. To me, this was just a chance to relive that era, enjoy some of the flashbacks and the new insights and new interviews. And to me, intellectually, there's no question when people talk about, well, you could have gone deeper on this, or you left out this, or why didn't you do this, or is it all skewed because Michael Jordan was part of this whole project? And all right, fine, it's all fine, but especially at a time like now when really we just needed entertainment, period. I'm not here to quibble about the details about The Last Dance. We can. I mean, it's fine if you guys want to talk about it. Nope. No, seriously, we could have those back and forth. But I'm just saying, as a viewer, for me, while I appreciate a lot of the things that were written about the documentary and whatever faults people may have seen in it, I thought it was incredibly well done, just really nicely put together. Tone, the scoring, the soundtrack, the pacing, and a lot of the material too. The two things that were most important, if you already lived through the 90s, if you already had seen these teams, aside from just being reminded with some of the old footage, the two things that were new that we looked forward to that were really important that they deliver were the behind the scenes footage that was the basis for doing this, right? All the hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, whatever it was, of footage that NBA Entertainment had shot over the 97-98 season that had never seen the light of day. So you wanted that. And then you wanted the modern day interviews with Michael and Scotty and Phil and Dennis Rodman and Kobe and David Stern, and many, many others, putting that era in context, going deeper on it. And of course, the Bulls themselves reflecting on all of that. And so if the two most important things coming out of this that were new were the old footage that we never got a chance to see and the modern day interviews of these guys reflecting back in a way that we rarely have, especially with Michael himself, it delivered very well on both counts. And again, if you want to quibble with the way it was presented or whatever else you think was missing or how you think it portrayed certain people, I get all of that. But was it a phenomenal ride for 10 episodes? Did it deliver on all that it promised in terms of new insights, new material, new reflections? Yeah, absolutely. At a very high level, I found it very satisfying, really enjoyable.
Right. And we talked about some of the criticisms that people have, sort of discussed about The Last Dance and it being, is this something that like Jordan helped produce? Is this something that he obviously had his hands in and all that stuff? And my whole thing, and we talked about this on a recent episode, was that if you're going to do this with Michael Jordan, and if you're going to get access to Michael Jordan, that's kind of part of the deal. Like once you're talking about this level of an elite person at what he does, it comes with the trade. Like, yeah, you're going to have to give up some sort of producer credit, if that makes sense. I mean, is that something that you saw throughout the making of this?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I had the director, Jason Hare, on my podcast last week. And, the way he viewed it, the way he kind of described it, I think, was just that, you start with a starting framework that this is Michael and the NBA have joint ownership of all this old footage. So there's a certain amount of influence there, but I don't think Michael had like final cut. I don't think Michael was in the editing room saying, yes, this, no, that, whatever. Now, did they maybe not go down certain roads because of his involvement? I would guess that's probably the case. But, Jason Hare was very adamant about the fact that he said, listen, I told the stories that I thought needed to be told. We talked about Michael's gambling problem or, his gambling passion.
Right.
Right.
We talked about these various controversies along the way. And we talked about Jesse Helms. And we explored these things. And that's fair. Now, if somebody wants to look at that and say, well, they could have gone further. Yeah, on a lot of things they could have gone further. It's a 10-part, 10-hour documentary that was taking on not just Michael. It wasn't just a straight up Michael Jordan biography. This was a project that was with Michael at the center, but that was rooted in the final season of the greatest modern dynasty we have seen, the Chicago Bulls. And it was Jason Hare's decision to say, well, to tell this story correctly, yeah, it's about the 97-98 season, the sixth championship season, but you can't understand what that season means and why it was, why roadblocks had been put up from the beginning, why the general manager, Jerry Krause, said it's over after this. We're not bringing Phil Jackson back, and this stage set for this thing to all come apart while they're still at the height of their game. That just doesn't happen. And to explain that correctly, in Jason Hare's view, well, then you got to explain why Scottie is pissed off with the franchise, and you got to explain who Dennis Rodman is and how close to the edge he was living and for how long, and you got to explain where Michael came from and where Phil came from, and so that becomes the framework for the series where, okay, we're going to start in 97-98 because that's what it's about. It's about the last dance. But now we got to flash back to Michael Jordan's early seasons and who he was before he was that Michael Jordan, and what Michael playing under Doug Collins was like versus playing under Phil Jackson, and how and what why that was significant, and with the changes that came with that. All this stuff along the way. By the time you do all that, you've filled up a lot of airtime.
Right.
So if you want nothing but an exploration of why Michael Jordan, the most influential athlete of our lifetimes, did not engage politically, was not an activist of any kind, would not even, advocate for a candidate who was running against a on the record racist.
Racist, yeah.
I mean, to understand that you have, yes, so they did just enough to give Michael's perspective and an explanation that we hadn't heard for decades, that we finally got from him directly about, yes, I made the comment about Republicans buy sneakers too. Here's why I don't engage politically or didn't at that time. And if people don't want to accept that, and a lot of people don't, that's fine. But asked and answered, they did it. Could you have gone for an hour on that alone? Yes. Could you have gone for an hour on, the Jordan brand and the sneakers and the price of those and kids getting killed about over his sneakers back? There's all kinds of different tangents you could have gone down. But this wasn't a Michael Jordan biography straight up. It was a lot of Michael Jordan, and he's at the center of it, but it was about that last season. And so I'm sympathetic to the critique, but I also am sympathetic to, the filmmakers and the director saying, I've got a lot to jam in here. And there's a lot of different pieces of this that I want to use. There's a lot of just images in this mosaic. You can't get to all of it. You can't go as deep as you might want to on all of it. Did you have to have Craig Hodges just because Craig Hodges was a teammate who was politically active and who has faced some consequences because of that? Do you really need Craig Hodges to critique Michael when you've already got Barack Obama on camera saying, yeah, it was disappointing that he didn't do a little more? I don't know. Obviously, a lot of people feel passionately about that. And I have my own opinion on what I think Michael could or couldn't or should or shouldn't have done. But I don't think this project was about, let's take on every single one of these issues and every potential controversial issue and go the distance on it. I think that ends up detracting from the conceit of this piece, which was, what happened in the 97-98 season? How did we get there? What was this dynasty about? And then along the way, yes, you have to hit certain markers and certain issues, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect that they were going to get that deep on every issue that any given viewer might have thought is the one that was of ultimate importance.
I think you said that well. I couldn't agree with you more on that. I haven't had major issue that they didn't go here or there. I actually was surprised they even touched some of the stuff, Howard, like gambling.
Yeah.
I didn't even think I thought they might have just glossed over that, but they did. I didn't even know how deep they would go into his feelings on his father's death, but I was glad they touched that because I thought it showed a lot of why he'd step away from the game and all that. And for me, as somebody who grew up during that time and got to watch them, it still was interesting because there were like little gaps and things that I didn't know because I was a teenager. And so watching that was what was interesting.